Welcome back, everyone. Hope you got a refreshment, got a chance to connect. Also wanted to plug, if you do want to join our WhatsApp channel, we had a QR code up there in case you want to follow our news on WhatsApp. We are going to be resuming our final track of this event on renewing trust and rethinking systems. We've seen a lot of breakdown in trust within the development community and a lot of rethinking of how we even, the whole aid infrastructure. So we're going to be digging into some of those themes. We're going to start off with a session on the role that NGOs can play in renewing trust in the global development space. So I'm going to hand it back to my colleague, Elissa Miolene, to lead that discussion.
Hi, everybody. If I can please have people go back to their seats if they're interested in learning about trust, something that I'm sure touches each and every one of you. So I hope to see everyone sitting back in their seats. All right, I'm also going to call up again an amazing set of panelists to the stage. So we have Degan Ali. Degan leads Adeso, and she's also a big champion for locally led development, which is something that Adeso does along with providing humanitarian response. We have David Bersoff. He is at the Edelman Trust Institute, which is an organization that really focuses on looking at how trust is measured and how people are trusting various aspects of our society. And then we have Christine Sao coming at us from Humentum, an organization that works to help organizations increase their effectiveness. And for those of you who don't know me, I am Elissa, and I am a reporter at Devex. Great. So thank you all so much for being with me today. It's great to have you up here and great to have you at our event.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Perfect. So we've got a lot to talk about today. The issue of trust is nuanced, it's big, and it affects all of us across the sector. David, Edelman just did some really interesting research talking about, what people are thinking and feeling about NGOs, businesses, government, media. Can you walk me through a little bit about what the team found and the implications specifically for NGOs?
Sure. So we've been measuring trust for about 25 years now. And for the first 2 decades that we measured trust, the number one trusted most institution when you look at NGOs, business, media, and government was NGOs. It was number one every single year up until about 1999. 1999, it tied with business. It was tied again in 2020. And since then, business has been increasing in trust while NGOs have sort of stagnated. And that's sort of the NGO trust story, is not so much that there was a big decline in trust, but that trust in NGOs had stagnated at about 55% of people thinking that NGOs can be trusted to do the right thing, plus or minus 3 points for the last 12 years. So if you just look at the NGO numbers, it's not a bad story, not necessarily a good story either. But what gets interesting is if you look at those NGO trust numbers in the context of what I think they should be or what they could be. If you think about the state of government trust, it's pretty bad. People don't have a lot of faith in government. There's a lot of paralysis. There's a lot of politicization. Not a lot is getting done. So we're in a situation where there's sort of a leadership vacuum when it comes to addressing social and societal problems. Now, on paper, if you look at the choices people have in a situation where government is failing, you have media, which is not really in the problem-solving business. You have NGOs, and you have business. Now, I've always thought that the last 5, 6, 7 years, NGOs should have been having a moment. NGOs are in the social problem solving business. They don't have to worry about the sort of the tension between earning profits and doing well. They are sort of the logical institution you would think that people would turn to when government is failing them. But what happened is that instead, people have been turning more to business. They've sort of nominated business as the savior, as the institution that's going to come in and, at least in the short term, fill the gap left by the government void. And so I wanted to understand what was going on. What was driving that choice? Now, when we measure trust, we measure it in two different dimensions. There's a capability dimension, like, are you good at what you do? Do you get things done? And then there's an ethical dimension. Are you trying to do good in the world? Are your motivations good? Do you serve everybody? Do you have a vision that we can all buy into? And what I found back in, that pivotal year, 1999, it was pre-pandemic. It was the first year that NGOs and business tied. What I found is that NGOs highest on ethical dimension, but lower on the capability dimension. Now, this is not including government, which is just low on everything. But if you're comparing government to business, there was a very clear and interesting choice. NGOs, much more ethical, not as capable or competent. Business, very capable and competent, but not necessarily ethical. At that point in time, people had a choice, and what they chose was their hero was the institution that was the doer, the one capable of getting things done. They were in desperate situation. Problems weren't being solved. Progress wasn't being made. Things weren't being addressed. And in deciding who they wanted to back, they went with the doer that didn't necessarily have a great ethical reputation over sort of the organization or institution with the heart of gold, but wasn't seen as being necessarily very effective. Now, in this story, I want to be clear, business is not the hero. Business is the anti-hero. Business is more Clint Eastwood than it is John Wayne. It is the organization that sort of had the biggest gun and the willingness to use it. They had that grit. They were seen as mean enough and tough enough to get the job done. And if you're in the small town and the outlaws are coming in on horses, who are you going to pick to defend you, to save you? Is it the hapless sheriff whose heart is in the right place, but he isn't really that tough? Or is it going to be the person who can get things done, even if their ethics might be a little bit suspect, even if their reputation isn't what you might want it to be? And so that is what I think ended up happening, is that in the context of nothing getting done, people chose the doer over the more ethical institution. Business also had a very good pandemic. They got a lot of credit for getting things done, for finding the vaccines, for coming through and saving as many jobs as possible. And even though, remember, this is perception, not necessarily reality, they got all the news coverage for what they were doing, and it just grew from there.
Yeah, thank you for that, David. I mean, bummer for the global development community. But I do want to also pull out another piece of that research, which is that this level of trust also varied across demographics. So I remember low-income folks who answered the survey had less trust, right, of NGOs.
Yes. So NGOs, as I said, sort of overall 55% trust to do what is right, plus or minus 3. Those are global numbers across everybody. In general, less trusted by people with the lower quartile income rather than the upper quartile income. There's been distrust among the lower quartile. It just edged up recently into kind of a neutral zone. You're also doing better in terms of trust in EMEA. You're sort of flat in LATAM, but a little downward in LATAM, but LATAM generally loves their NGOs. Not doing well in North America and Europe. A lot of basically your donor countries.
Yeah. So I think, it's fascinating. And I think David has given us some insight into perhaps why. I do want to reflect this back, though, on our other two panelists, Christine and Degan. I think, Degan, let's start with you. I mean, as someone who works directly with communities and really kind of is hearing from many folks, many of whom are also not pleased, or maybe they are pleased. Or tell me a bit more about how these results hit you, why you think that trust has gone down, or that trust isn't as high as we perhaps think it should?
I think also it's really interesting, the results that things changed around 1999 to 2000s. That's about the same time that you saw the corporatization of NGOs. That's the same time that we saw NGOs becoming, who were much more nimble, who were much more hands-on in their work and all of that. And I think maybe in response to this criticism about efficiency, you saw them becoming more corporatized, more systems, more due diligence, more bureaucracy. The machinery is massive in these INGOs. And then you also saw their corporatization in their boards and their metrics and ambitions. They went from being 50 million, $100 million organizations to now being $1 billion organizations. And then you see a lot of corporate actors in their boards. And once you bring in the corporates, you start having these kinds of metrics where the CEO's success is based on how big the income is, how growth, how many countries you're operational in, and how many communities you serve. So it's a very expansionist colonial model where you plant your flag and you try to be a response in as many countries as possible. So those are the metrics of success. At the same time, I mean, those results don't surprise me, because the larger they have become, honestly, the more bureaucratic they have become and the less in touch they are with the communities. And especially the result around lower income community members having less trust is because they have more interaction with them. They are the ones who are dealing with them for health, education, food aid, whatever it may be. And so they are the ones who are interacting with them on a regular basis. And they can probably make a much more comprehensive judgment about the quality of the service and what they're receiving. So these results honestly don't surprise me. And it reflects also, is a concern for me as a Global South actor who has been really advocating for more locally led, that we in the Global South end up mimicking and copying this INGO behavior in how we work with our own communities. And so sometimes bigger is not better. And so a lot of local organizations, you see them with ambitions to become like an INGO, to get a $5 million USAID grant, a $10 million grant, not thinking that actually becoming bigger is actually going to make you less rooted in the communities and lose that local touch and that local understanding. So there's problems. And then, of course, the other side is, as a local actor who has seen you, and by the way, the ones that should be assessed is the UN. The UN gets the largest chunk of the funding, but they are the least trustful and the least efficient and the least impactful, in my opinion. So I would say that the UN would probably get an F rating in this thing. And so if you are a local organization, you are, so all of these issues about trust is also like, how do you assess trust? What are the metrics for assessing trust? In the West, we look at trust as, do you have 3 years of audit reports? Do you have nice fancy reporting? A lot of these groups that are billion-dollar corporate NGOs have amazing, beautiful reports, beautiful websites, 5-star Charity Navigator rating, but at the same time, on the ground, like I said, the communities don't trust them. Why? Because the impact is very poor. So what is it that we are basing this barometer of trust? Is it that you have these reports, that you have these fancy offices and you are credible because now you can manage a $50 million USAID grant? Is that your metrics of trust? Or is it that you have impact, you're locally rooted, and the community says, there are mutual aid volunteer groups right now operating in Sudan in the middle of a famine, who have no structures. They're not even registered, and they are managing millions and millions of dollars. They are the backbone of the humanitarian response right now in Sudan. None of them are, majority, 90% of them are not registered organizations. So people like you and me who are in the community who decided to start giving people food, who started I'm a doctor, so I start giving healthcare and all of these kinds of what they call mutual aid. And they're running the majority of the humanitarian response. None of them can produce for you a nice report. None of them can produce for you 3 years of audit track record. But are they having impact? Will the community say we trust them and these are the ones we want to work with them? Hell yeah. But we in the global north will say, no, we can't trust them with $500,000, $50,000 because they don't have these systems in place. So we have to also question, why is it that we have this problem and how we define trust?
Thank you, Degan. Christine, I want to turn the mic over to you because I'm curious, one, again, how all of this hits you, and two, thinking about solutions. I mean, what can we do to address what David's told us, address what Degan's told us? Are members in Humentum thinking about this and curious what they're saying and thinking and feeling?
Thanks. Yeah, I think I just will build on what Degan was saying. I mean, we are working in an ecosystem. We're working in a structure that exists and that has been built. And as I heard Degan say this morning, if you think the system is broken, the system is actually working the way it was designed for the people who designed it. It's not working the way it should work, and it's not working for local actors. And so if we're looking at, for example, the way that funding flows to nonprofits, typically that's in a 1 year, a 3 year, a 5 year funding cycle. That funding, when it's over, and people pick up and have to pack up their offices and lay off their staff and leave. And we know that trust is built by long-standing, deep relationships in a community. We know that when we can move beyond funding that is on a short-term cycle dictated by a funder, we can build trust within a community and the people who are working with that community that is deeply rooted and actually is making that impact. And I've been working in global development for 31 years now, and we've been talking about this as long as I've been working in global development. So it's not that these are things that we don't have answers to. We have answers. We need to have funders who recognize this and are actually brave enough to change the way that they work. And one of the things that's really important is providing support to community foundations and to community fundraising and to community action so that it is not people parachuting in from outside. It is people within the communities who know what they need, who are being funded to do the work with their own communities. And to Degan's point about Sudan, that's a great example. But we know that there are local and national organizations out there that are working very hard, but are being held to working in a structure that was built for other purposes, for other people, and very much with a colonial mindset. So, what do we need to do now? We know we need to fund the true costs of the commitments that organizations are signing up for with donors. Right now, we know that donors are not covering those true costs. We need to have funders, regardless of what level they're working at, we need to have funders who will provide funding to build the reserves of local and national organizations that are working in their own communities, that they get unrestricted funding to use to fund what they do best, not being told by a funder, our flavor of the week is X and you're going to do that. We should be listening to them and saying, okay, we're going to fund you because you're closest to the issue and you know how to do this best. And I think, it's not mysterious why trust erodes. We know why trust erodes, and trust is multi-directional. It's not top down or bottom up. It really needs to be established within the ecosystem between whoever's funding the work, whoever's doing the work, and whoever should be actually deciding what work needs to be done and then participating in the work that's done.
Thanks for that, Christine. Curious, just turning back to you, David. I mean, in terms of your research and what you've found, do you think that there's learnings that the NGO community can take from perhaps the business community that is doing better, or learnings they can take from what not to do that the government and sadly media is not doing better either?
Sure. I mean, there's a couple of things that come out of the research beyond sort of the obvious, and the first one being, of course, you have to emphasize more your accomplishments. You have to get that competence needle, that capability needle. You have to move that. I think what happened back in 2019 and 2020 is that sort of NGOs brought ethics to a competence fight and they lost to business. But I also think that business having all of this pressure being placed on it, all this expectation to start weighing in on social issues to sort of address the problems that have traditionally been addressed by NGOs is in some ways also an opportunity, because in my mind, I'm having a hard time seeing how business is going to successfully address all of these significant social societal problems without help. And that there is an opportunity for NGOs to play a significant part in that. It's almost like NGOs becoming the engine of social and societal change within business, because business is going to fail if they try to do this all by themselves. They don't have the expertise. They don't have the ability to organize on the ground. They don't have the history and experience in dealing with these big thorny issues. And I can starting to see it a little bit in the data, in that the ethics score for business has gone up while it's become more engaged in addressing some of these issues, but it's starting to taking a little subtle competence hits, because these issues are really hard. It is difficult to deliver success on a quarterly basis in the way a business is used to doing. So they're starting to really get into a jam, and I think there is some real potential here for stronger, better, more significant and meaningful NGO business collaborations. It's not about giving money per se, but I really think that NGOs need a seat at the corporate business table when they're talking about how are we going to deal with these expectations of our employers and our customers and even of investors, that we need to start thinking about healthcare access and discrimination and oppression and climate and any other number of issues that they are not equipped to handle. So I think there's a real opportunity there based on a growing need business is going to have for the kinds of expertise and what you guys can bring to the table. It's just making sure that it's a meaningful partnership and not just a partnership in name or a transfer of funds, because they need your expertise just as much as you need their money.
Great. With the little time we had left, I just want to talk about one more thing, which is, transparency and how important that is when we're thinking about, like Degan said, how we measure trust, what that means, and how we measure impact, and how transparent organizations are or are not with the work that they're doing. Degan, I'm curious to hear from you in terms of where you think we are on that scale as a global development community. Are we at the transparency levels that we need to be, that perhaps might be a good ingredient to help us build trust?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is a huge problem, is that when we come into communities, majority of there's a Indian NGO that I've heard that I really want to visit. And what they do is that every time they go to a location, to a village, they post publicly all the project budget to the community. So the detailed budget, every single cent, where it's going and everything, the community has full access to it. When you walk into their office, they have their entire salaries up on the wall. Everybody knows what everybody's earning. If you're a community member, you'll know what the executive director is earning, what anybody's earning. That is a radical level of transparency, But here we are as locals, we can't even get a budget from the UN agencies we partner with or the NGOs from what did EU give you? What did USAID give you? How much of that $5 million grant is actually going to me as a partner? And the reality is majority of it is not going to me as a partner. And if I'm doing 70, 60, 80% of the work, that tells you that majority of it is not going to the communities. This is why there is no desire to have transparency, because a lot of the money sits in headquarters, in staffing positions, and the UN is the worst out of all of them. And so there is no how, and that's what I'm talking about. Like this, people know, the communities know, they understand the game. They're not stupid, and so why would they trust us? Why would they trust us when they know that what's happening? They know that for every dollar that is coming from London or the US or DC, very little goes to them on the ground. They see these expensive vehicles that we're driving around, these Toyota Land Cruisers. They know that we're living behind these massive walls in these posh neighborhoods of Nairobi. They know that. They're not idiots. So how do you expect them to trust you when they see how little you value? There's no return on investment. There's no metrics around impact based on the dollar. That's why they go to the private sector, because the private sector is making sure that for every dollar that they spend it in the most efficient and impactful way. They understand that. So we have to change our behavior if we really want to gain their trust back. And right now, I honestly don't think that the aid sector is ready to do it.
Well, let's hope our next panel can solve that problem for us, huh? No, thank you guys so much. It was great to talk to you about trust. There's clearly a lot here, a lot to think about, and appreciate your time today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks.